Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
I don't think when I was experiencing that stigma that it was malicious. I think it was because they just didn't understand it. I don't think it was as talked about then as it is now.
Like, the world was far from perfect before coronavirus.
Yeah.
And I have a real fear that the reality of that striking for a lot of people will be quite hard to deal with, probably for myself included.
Whatever anyone says, that is your thing. And I said, I told the lady who assessed me, and she was like, no, it doesn't fit with what we've got. So, no.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. Okay, here we are at the end of March 2021, and welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday with me, Mick Coyle. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and once again, an important conversation to have. Episode 198, can you believe? This week. I'm trying my best to make sure that we've got something for episode 200. We're just about to head into that slightly odd period of time now with a bank holiday weekend, so we'll be missing an episode coming up. I've got a week off, by the way, for that. So you may see a little tiny hole in your podcast feed. Apologies for that. But we'll be making sure that episode 200 does represent the very best of what we've been able to achieve through Mental Health Monday. Thanks to everybody getting involved in the conversation. Thanks for everyone getting involved in the Facebook group that we've set up as well. And for the people who are hashtagging Mental Health Monday on social media. Got a great guest for you on the way. Beth Rees is our guest. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in just a few moments' time because her story is a really interesting one. But Beth was really pleased to see the conversation that we had last week with Dean Russell MP really came to life in the House of Commons. So at the moment, the bill is going through Parliament, which will see mental health first aid available in all workplaces and colleges. Now, there's sort of parliamentary process involved in all of this, but we're on the right track to make that a reality and to make that happen, which is really, really good news. It was good to get Dean Russell on the programme on last week's show, which we had to split into two parts, and we did them on two separate days. But I think as long as you've got them in the feed, you'll get a full heads up as to what the conversation is all about. With that in mind, let's hear from Beth. Beth writes a blog called Just a Square Peg, justasquarepeg.com for that one, talking about being in a... sort of in between a couple of potential diagnoses. One that she has currently for borderline personality disorder, but also potentially as well autism, and how sitting between the two leaves her in her own particular situation. She talks through the situation around that, and it's a fascinating insight actually in terms of diagnosis and labels that people either like or don't like to have put upon them. So it's a really interesting story, and we'll come on to that in a few moments' time. First up, though, Beth was keen to support the work of Dean Russell MP and believes that, absolutely, it can make a huge difference to people's lives if mental health first aid is much more widely available.
Oh, it's going to be massive. And I think, firstly, a big thank you to Dean on behalf of anybody who's ever had kind of struggles at work with their mental health. I think it's a really big step forward. I recorded it and watched it on the day that he did it, and I sat with my partner and I felt really emotional about it because, like I said, I've sort of experienced kind of mental health stigma at work, in the past at the start of my career, and it's such a big deal to be able to think that 10 years ago, there wasn't anyone you could go to if you were struggling. You kind of had to make up that you had a cough or a cold in order just to kind of get that day where, you feel really down. So actually having someone to go to in the workplace to say, I don't feel okay, and for someone to signpost you to the right kind of services and help is just amazing. It's so important.
I kind of get a sense as well that it will make a huge difference to businesses, those businesses who maybe weren't, malicious in their treatment of staff, but just had complete lack of understanding. They'll benefit hugely.
They will. And you know what, actually, I don't think when I was experiencing that stigma that it was malicious. I like you say, I think it was because they just didn't understand it. I don't think it was as talked about then as it is now. And I think, they've sort of probably been learning for the last, 10 years up until this point. So, I think it's great. And as a Time to Change champion, it's lovely to go into workplaces and the employers are really keen to sign that pledge and say, yes, we will, treat people fairly. We will give them the time to tell us what's wrong, and we'll try to help them as well and kind of facilitate and help them with any needs they've got. So I think it's brilliant.
That sort of lack of understanding, lack of education, lack of knowledge, In what sort of ways does that manifest itself, do you think, within workplaces? What are the mistakes, if you like, that workplaces are making?
I think sometimes because there's such a wide range of mental health conditions for a start, that sometimes, people don't understand what people do in those sorts of things. So if you're depressed, people will think you're down, but some days you could have a really good day, but then have a really bad day. It's kind of, and it's also really personal. So I know a lot of people now who kind of say to me, what do you think? Do you think I should tell my employer? And it's really tricky for me to kind of recommend if they do or they don't, because you don't know what, kind of organization they work for or what the people are like. So I just, it's kind of like gauging it. But I think, employers now, I've tried to bring about the Time to Change pledge in a couple of places that I've worked, just, so that they are recognised as places that can help. But I think as well, like for me with, I've got borderline personality disorder and that's not particularly well known about, I guess, in workplaces. And I blogged for Mind about it and how, what it's like being in a workplace with BPD. And bless, my employers tried, throughout the years, have tried really hard to understand it. And sometimes I don't even understand it. So, I think doing, mental health first aid, I think when I did it, they tell you about anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, things that actually you might come across. And, people I was doing the course with were like, I did not even know that. I didn't know that was a side effect, So, yeah, I think they're learning as they go. And I think it's really good. I think I'm becoming a lot more open-minded as well, I think.
But actually, from the example you've given there, classic example as to why this law change is needed, that actually people come to you as a mental health champion, if you like, and say, should I tell my boss? And your answer is still, I don't know. Whereas actually, if they said, I've fallen over and my finger's fallen off, should I tell my boss? You would say, of course, because you would know there are processes in place, there's a strategy, and there is almost like a duty upon your boss to help and sort out. And that's the disparity, isn't it? That's absolutely clear from what you've said there.
And it's really funny because I really want to say to people, you should be able to tell them, and they should be quite accepting and say, okay, what can we do to help? Shall we work on like a plan to going forward? And like, for example, where I work at the moment, my boss has been absolutely amazing. The organisation have been amazing. We've gone through a wellbeing plan. She's always checking to see if I'm okay. Like it's amazing. And I'm really lucky. And I kind of hope that for other people as well, that they, will be able to hopefully in the future, have someone designated there that is not only first aid trained in case, you need CPR or medical attention, but actually if you're going through a really tough time and you don't know what to do.
Absolutely. And I think as well, if you are a boss, I think not taking steps almost represents a failing in your part as a boss. Because if you think about not just the way things have been, but the way things will move forward in terms of working from home, working in an office, particularly women coming back from maternity leave and having sort of flexible hours and hour changes there, people who might be having ongoing physical treatment that they need to take certain time away from the office for. And often organisations now take steps to help out in regard to all of those things. And actually to do that from a mental health point of view, not just creates or takes away some of the issues that the employee might be having, but also I think that there's a strong argument there that your staff retainment levels will be higher because you think my boss is great, they understand me, they understand how my life works, this is a place I'm going to stay, and also I think productivity becomes higher because you don't have those flashpoint moments where suddenly nothing can happen. And I think that's almost the argument that needs to be made to industry to kind of say, look, productivity levels in the UK are different to levels across Europe. Here's one possibility that simply improves it, I think, almost at a stroke, that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I mean, it was interesting to hear what Dean was saying last week about, the amount of people that have had, sick days and actually have been able to say, I'm not in a very good place mentally. I feel really anxious. I'm feeling really down, and I think, that's sort of a great thing. And I think working from home has been really good in a way, because I think it's given more people kind of a better work-life balance. But for someone like me who doesn't know when to stop, I found it really difficult. But again, my boss is so good because I work sort of up until a certain point in the day. She texts me and it's like, have you finished? You should finish now. Stop working, So, even small things like that, I just think, oh, she gets me and she understands it, and it's really like a big relief. And I think, like I said, if other people can have that as well, I think, it's a lot better. And especially now, being a mental health first aider, even if you've got to do it virtually for the time being, I think is really important. I think people are going to struggle with, anxiety coming out of lockdown, having to go back on a busy train to work, having to, go into the workplace. So, yeah, I think it's really funny actually, like, when we sort of first proposed it, it was important, and now it's more important than ever.
Absolutely. I don't know and we're going on slightly off topic here now. I kind of wonder whether or not at the moment this sort of like, I get a sense that life after lockdown is to anybody their ideal life. Like, I think we all have these images in our mind about what our version of life after lockdown will look like. And for some people, it's the barbecues. For some people, it's back to the office.
Yeah.
For some people, it's meeting friends and it's going down the pub. But I think that my fear is that the realities of life after lockdown won't be. And people will very quickly start to go, oh, I'm here again. I'm back on the commute that I didn't enjoy. I'm back in the office with the people I didn't like working with. And my real fear is that will have a massive impact, because there's a temptation to believe that after lockdown we enter some sort of like perfect world where coronavirus doesn't exist, but coronavirus will still clearly exist. And all of those issues, like, the world was far from perfect before coronavirus.
Yeah.
And I have a real fear that the reality of that striking for a lot of people will be quite hard to deal with, probably for myself included, where you suddenly go, oh, right, this is real life now. Because to almost, we've almost sort of like, it's hard to sometimes remember what life was like before, because we've had now a year of slight adjustments, but some people have been almost like in complete lockdown within their towns for the entirety of the year, with these sort of brief moments in between. But that's a long way to almost retrain your brain and get into a different place, I think.
Definitely. And actually, when you were saying about towns, so we're in Caerphilly, and Caerphilly were the first place in Wales going to lockdown in September, and we had like about a week, I think, where, my birthday week, where we went for a meal in a very kind of safe environment. And then the day after, it was like, boom, back into lockdown again. It was like, oh, right, okay. So I think it is. I think it's really I think it's a bit like nerving for people. And I really admire, and I love his work, Matt Haig, mental health campaigner and author. And he had said something about, we're all looking forward to this normal. But actually normal was, we were too stressed, we were too busy, we were anxious, we didn't have enough time for ourselves, we didn't look after ourselves, we were always on the go. And this has meant now that actually a lot of people have just kind of stopped. And I felt that really resonate, because I always on the go, always doing things. And actually now it's kind of like, I need to take a step back and think about whether I'm doing it for me, or I'm just doing it because I'm a yes person and I like to sort of please other people. So I think it's really important. But what he said is absolutely kind of spot on. And what you were saying, life wasn't perfect before. And actually, I don't know whether, lockdowns actually may have helped a couple of people, with their mental health, and actually self-care, and think, well, I don't want to go and do that today. Or actually, I'm going to walk to work instead, so I don't have to be around people, but I'll get that exercise and look after myself. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes to come.
At the moment, we've got this vision of the perfect end of lockdown, and it's going to work for everybody in a way which is perfect for everybody. And I think we'll probably find out pretty sharpish that that's not going to be the case. But whether or not that means that, we all run headlong out of lockdown with our arms waving in the air, saying, hooray, here we go,
it's
life
over.
begins afresh. That might be one way forward. Another way forward might be to let a few days pass, to assess yourself and think, right, how am I going to move forward? What's going to be right for me, not just for the next 6 months, but for the next 2 or 3 years?
Definitely. And it's funny actually, because obviously now in Wales we're open, we're starting to kind of lift a couple of restrictions, and like in the supermarket we can buy things now that were non-essential before, and we thought the supermarket was going to be really, really busy, and when we went we were like, wow, there's nobody about. And it's funny, like you said, everyone's going to think there's going to be a massive rush, wow, we're done, we're out. But actually, even a little thing like lifting the non-essential items in shops, we thought there was going to be a massive rush, and there hasn't been. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see kind of what happens and how people kind of react, I guess.
See, if that had been England, we'd all been about buying washing machines and microwaves and
Yes.
things like that. Just piling 3 or 4 into a trolley. Just get it through the till as quickly as possible.
Go.
Now, Beth, let's just talk about your blog, Just a Square Peg, which is a great phrase. But it talks of and speaks of this sort of and people often talk about labels and diagnosis, but it speaks of like life in an in-between world. You mentioned borderline personality sort of there, but you mentioned autism as well. Just frame for us sort of where you're at in terms of yourself, in terms of that sort of in-between spot, if you like.
I think you're right, actually. I feel very much like a square peg right now, because I was diagnosed in 2017 with borderline personality disorder, or BPD, and I kind of felt really relieved, like, wow, this explains so much about me growing up and the fact that I struggled quite a lot. Wow, this is great. And then a counsellor and my GP was sort of like, we're starting to think that maybe this isn't quite right for you. And when I started reading about it, I was like, I don't know, really. And then my counsellor, actually, she's autistic, so she said, I really, really think that you need to be assessed. And in 2017, I got assessed, and it came back. The lady said, your mum says you were fine as a kid. You don't have really very, intense interests, and you don't seem to me like you're autistic. And I was so crushed, because I think lots of, medical professionals have said, no, we think that's it. So I just sort of put it to the side and thought, you know what, it's obviously BPD. I need to start learning about myself. And so I started doing that. And then in last year, I had an appointment in November with the psychiatrist, and she said, I've got a horrible feeling that you are not, you haven't got BPD. And in fact, I think you might be autistic. How do you feel about that? And I said, well, it's been mentioned before, but someone said I didn't look it and I didn't act it. So, and then she said, in this phone call, I have spotted several things, and I really think that you need to pursue it again. And she said, thank you for being so persistent. I know our services are very stretched. I'm really sorry that you haven't had the support, but I really, really think that you should do this, because I think you're going to find peace of mind in it. So I filled out what ended up being 24-page referral form for our local autism service. And I've been accepted onto the waiting list. So I'm currently waiting, but I think it's December. But like you said, I'm in limbo at the moment. I don't really know. It's really strange. A lot of people say labels don't matter, diagnosis doesn't matter, but there is a sense of identity in that, and I feel a little bit lost at the moment. So I'm trying to sort of talk about it in case there are other people, and I've had a couple of women message me and say, oh my gosh, this happened to me. They said, somebody said I had bipolar, and when I sort of when it all turns out I'm actually autistic. And it's really funny, you go from you have this thing that is altering your life to you actually are this, and it's just that your brain works differently, and they're two very different things. So yeah, I'm in a bit of a limbo, but I'm trying to sort of share that with other people and hope that, if there are women out there who think they might be autistic, that maybe they pursue it and see if they can find out a bit more.
So this is a topic that a colleague of mine has been working on recently, because it's an issue, particularly the diagnosis of autism within girls and women is significantly lower within boys, but because there seems to be such a prevalence of boys, it appears, and this might not be factually correct, but it appears that we've essentially defined autism by how boys display their autism. So the things that you would associate with boys and autism are often seen as the tick box things that you then assess a girl for, but they might actually be very different for females. It's almost as if there's a sense we almost need to sort of redefine our understanding of autism, or almost have almost like a gender specific definition of autism, which again would be a huge step forward in terms of understanding as well. I think it's interesting as well, that idea of that labels, that you don't then get a t-shirt that then just says I'm autistic, or it used to be borderline personality on it, now it's
now it's something else.
Which that wouldn't be something that I don't think that most people do. But actually, when you mentioned about borderline personality disorder and that diagnosis, you were then able to go away, read up on it, find out some more information, and things started to resonate with you, which just goes to show it's about relatability and almost like a self-signposting tool for you to be able to kind of go, all right, that makes sense to me now, or that makes sense of something that happened 10 or 15 years ago that I've never really been able to explain, but now I understand it.
Yes, and I think that's what I felt with BPD, I think, to start with. Oh wow, like, okay, this explains a bit, but but then like when the psychiatrist, my GP and the counsellor mentioned, actually 95% that you're autistic. And when I spoke to the autism service, the guy said, you've been assessed, yeah? And I was like, no. And he went, I'd be surprised if you're not, but I can't diagnose. So I've been able to speak to them, but actually I bought all the books that there are about written by women who have autism. I have read a lot of them, and it's really comforting to read about people who are just these amazing, strong women who are autistic and have managed to do all these amazing things and have pinpointed, well, here are some things. For example, jobs, apparently. So I've had quite a few jobs, and I always thought it was just because I just didn't fit in, and that I just kind of thought, I haven't really found where I'm going to thrive or that I'm good. But actually it's a thing within, being autistic, is that you have kind of almost like meltdown, then shutdown. And that happens at work, and then you leave because you just get so overwhelmed. And I just always thought it was a failing in me, I'm not mentally strong enough to be in a busy workplace. But actually, like, reading about it now and actually being able to talk to my boss, my manager about it, she's like, I've been reading about it, I want to be able to help you. And it's absolutely incredible. So yeah, it's a funny one, because I think it's for every 3 males that are diagnosed, 1 woman or 1 female. And you're right, it's very, kind of leaning towards, boys. And there definitely needs to be a change in the way that, it's looked at, and, sort of interest. Because I sort of said to my counsellor, I think, I said, well, me, I've got a massive thing, a bit of an obsession about, the programme Sex and the City. And I've watched it about 8 times. I've read all the books. I've seen the films. I did my dissertation at uni on it. And she's like, yeah, that is a special interest. Like, whatever anyone says, that is your thing. And I said, I told the lady who assessed me, and she was like, no, it doesn't fit with what we've got. So, no. So it is, like you said, they're definitely, it's moving in the right direction, I think. But I'm a little bit scared.
No, absolutely. And I think, knowledge brings with it, power and a sort of sense of self as well. Could it be, and I'm just a hypothesis, because of my understanding here, obviously borderline personality disorder people would talk about a mental health issue there, whereas autism is sort of neurodevelopmental, isn't it, which is slightly different. But I can't imagine you'd reach a point where you go, sorry, BPD, it's not you, I'm not doing any more mental health work, because actually now I'm now in this neurodevelopmental world. That's where the angle I'm going in. I kind of get a sense that you've placed the two together, because that's sort of formed your journey so far.
Definitely, and that's the thing. I don't think I can almost turn my back on that, because that is almost like what I've identified with, and for the last couple of years. So I mean, it's entirely possible. They've kind of said, we think it's a misdiagnosis of BPD, but actually it could be comorbid with something else. So I could have both, but at the moment it's that in between, I think, where I'm not entirely sure. And I, last time I was kind of like, when I went for my private assessment, I was like, oh, maybe I will, maybe I am, maybe this will. Everyone all these people that are in kind of good, medical positions are telling me. And then this lady still said, no, you don't fit the criteria, and that's that. So I'm a little bit scared that that's going to happen again. But the autism service in our area have been amazing. And they're just like, if you ever want to ring us and do a Zoom and, talk to us about your worries, you can, because you're on the list, we want to help you. So, yeah, it's looking promising, but we'll see.
It's great, and it's great that you've had that sort of response, particularly from your local services, because I guess no matter what the label or no matter what the diagnosis, it's still you, isn't it? It's still you in the way that you see the world, and I guess that doesn't change as a result of the diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's funny actually. I get a lot of people always say you're too nice, and they've always said it in a really negative way. In sort of jobs at the start of my career, you're far too nice, and I sort of go, oh, okay. And now my other half says you're too nice, but like you said, in a good way. And I think it's things that people have pointed out during my life that have been like, that's bad, don't do that. I bite, so sometimes when I'm kind of deep in thought, I bite the inside of my lip, my cheek, and people have been like, what are you doing? That's really weird. Like, stop doing that. So, but actually it's called stimming. It's self-soothing in it. Like, if you're autistic, that's what you do. And my counsellor said, the first time I saw you, I knew because she said, you sat there and you didn't give me eye contact and chewing on the side of your face, all these sort of indicators. So it's being able to do those things and not feel ashamed of it, I think.
And I guess as well, when we bring it back around to sort of knowledge within a workplace environment, but it doesn't have to just be a workplace environment. It can be, a million and one different environments, a home environment as much as anything. I guess, this is why the education is so important, that we almost need to understand, so that if you raise any of the issues that we've just been talking about now, that at least there might be a sense that you might hear, even if they're not full understanding, a sense of maybe empathy that might come back, or like, oh, I think I heard about this, or I remember reading about this, or oh, is this the thing where X, Y, or Z? Would at least give you a sense that other people had a sense of knowledge about some of those things, and that would be a really nice place to be. It kind of feels like we're a bit of a way away from that at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the moment, like my job, I am so lucky. I have such an amazing team of people who really understand and are learning, like, on my behalf, they're learning, and I sort of said, like, for example, I've always had trouble with a lot of processes. Like, I can't seem to understand if something's written in a certain way, it just doesn't go in. And now, my manager's saying to me, okay, well, tell you what, we'll talk about it on the phone first, and then I'll email you, and then you email me back and just like give me an idea of what you think, and then I'll confirm, so it's really good. I get to double check that my thought process is okay and that it's right. And she's so good. She's got the time. She's just like, I don't want you to struggle by yourself. It's hard, everyone working from home, that I can't see you, but I want you to ring me or text me or whatever, and I can explain it to you. So like, I'm really lucky, but I mean, there are obviously, there's still a lot of work to go, and probably in other kind of organizations or workplaces. But like we were saying, with this bill, I think it's going in the right direction, and I think it's a really positive thing.
Absolutely. I noticed the dog now in the background is
oh my gosh,
starting
she's in the garden. I've locked her out, and she's still like,
she's now saying it's time to let her in. Well, it's okay, because we're reaching the end of the conversation, Beth. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll just mention actually a bit of Time to Change champion, and we just got to mention, by the way, that Time to Change as we know it won't be around. An organisation 15 years or so, which has done incredible work, hasn't it?
It has, but you know what? I'm a Time to Change Wales champion, and Time to Change Wales have just secured 12 more months of funding. So I am still a volunteer for Time to Change Wales, which is amazing. I think they announced it yesterday. So it's really sad about Time to Change in England, because there are so many people who have done amazing work there, and it is such a shame. Because I know, volunteering with Time to Change Wales for the last 4 years, they're incredible, and what they do is actually making a lot of kind of progress in workplaces. So it's really sad for England, but it's a really good thing for Wales that we're still going. So
yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned to actually Jo Loughran, who's the chief exec, when she was on the programme, fingers crossed that the expertise and the knowledge that's within these organisations, whether they're here for another year or whether they disappear, moves into another field, so at least that knowledge is not lost, because as champions it's become this huge movement, and long may it continue, particularly in Wales, if it's can be secured for beyond the next 12 months. So that's brilliant news as well. justasquarepeg.com, is that the website where people can go?
That's me.
People can find out more information there. Beth Rees, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you joining us for Mental Health Monday.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just really pleased to have been on, and well done again to Dean Russell for making those inroads and making a big impact.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999.